To the viewers watching this on Saturday the 20th, welcome back. Hopefully all is well, and thank goodness it is Saturday. If any of you guys are football fans, American football that is, I know I have some subscribers across the pond, today is a stressful day for some of us. I happen to be from Wisconsin, and so the Packers are and will always be my team. If you happen to watch this video after the game, I sure hope we won. If not, I will still be happy with beating the Cowgirls. Hello to anyone who just came across my channel. I'm a younger car enthusiast who likes to learn about the cars before my time. I wasn't around, so that might be a little discouraging. However, I spend many hours doing research and reading comments to obtain the most accurate information, all while making it interesting. I never want to come across as if I'm a robot reading a script. I have personal opinions that I will bring up. If you want to bring something to my attention or even debate something, feel free to comment down below as I respond to 95% of the comments. I feel like these intros are getting a little long, but I will remind you that I have chapters in the description, so if you never want to watch an intro again, feel free to skip it over. With all of that, a dedicated video to some of the most bizarre 80s editions from the Blue Oval. Ford Pinto Rally Cruising Wagon. The Ford Pinto is iconic in its own way. Personal thoughts and opinions aside, these things were what consumers wanted at the time. They were Ford's response to the Gremlin from AMC and Vega from General Motors. I do have a video dedicated to the Vega and its variants if you are interested. These subcompact cars sold very well for Ford. A little more than 3 million units rolled off the assembly line over its 10-year production run. With the Pinto name came a few variations. There was the 2-door sedan, 3-door runabout, and the 2-door station wagon. The same thing can be said for GM and its Vega. They even had a panel wagon in their lineup. And yes, a 2-door station wagon was an option for consumers. When I think of station wagon, and I'm sure many of you guys would agree, we think of the LTD Country Squire, Chevy Caprice Estate, or even the AMC Eagle. However, 2-door wagons weren't new to consumers, they actually date back to the 50s. So this wasn't out of the ordinary, especially for the 70s. In 1977, Ford introduced these graphics packages for not only the wagon, but also the other Pintos. And so Ford called these the Pinto Cruising Wagon. We can see some slight differences here compared to the, regular Squire wagons. Obviously these were to appeal to the younger crowd. Ford also made a cruising van as well, if you didn't know. I'm not exactly sure the name of it. I don't think it's an Econoline. I feel really dumb right now, but I'm not gonna look it up. So yes, there is a cruising van edition as well, and I think it looks awesome. Fast forward a year later and the Sports Rally package was introduced, and these would be offered until the demise of the Pinto in 1980, so technically it just makes the cutoff. I would agree that these wagons have more 70s styling over any really 80s styling. I mean, they were unchanged for the most part since their debut in 71. So what did you get with this Rally package? Essentially, it was added to the cruising wagon package, just there were some new features, such as a tachometer, temperature gauges, front spoiler or splitter, unique wheels, front stabilizer bar, sport steering wheel, and a 4-speed manual, all for the extra cost of $625 back in 1980. The main difference between these and regular models, apart from those amazing graphics that speak their time very appropriately, was the addition of those, as Ford calls them, bubble glass porthole windows. And if you ask me, I think they're really cool. So there you have it, the Ford Pinto Rally Cruising Wagon. If you happen to love the Ford Pinto, then you'll know that there is so much more with these variants and trims. As I say a lot of the time, I'll have to save it for another video. Ford Thunderbird Fila Edition. This is an interesting one. Ford has had some prior collaborations with designer brands in the past. More specifically, during the early 80s, Lincoln paired up with Givenchy, Cartier, Bill Blass, and Pucci. And it doesn't stop here with these brands. Off the top of my head, Plymouth had a Nautica edition for the Villager. Even the Thunderbird had a Diamond Jubilee edition back in 1978 as a way to celebrate 75 years. So when we fast forward to the 9th generation, which came out only a year prior to this edition, it wasn't all that shocking at the time. In 2024 time, this edition is super bizarre, even more so with the brand Fila. I'm younger and I don't see all that many people repping this stuff anymore. Speaking of the 9th generation, how do we feel about these Fox body inspired Thunderbirds? Let me show you the 8th generation, now the 7th generation, and back to the 9th. Yeah, it definitely represents the downsizing crisis here in the States back during the 70s to 80s. Personally, I think the looks are growing on me from a present day perspective. Enough context, what was this Fila package all about? First, these were only available for 1 year with 2,532 units produced. Second, these almost cost $2,000 more than the Turbo Coupe models, with a total cost of around $16,000 back in 1984. And here is one of the flaws with these Fila editions: the V6 came standard with the option of a V8. There was no way to get the turbo in these. Let me go over the numbers, maybe I'm wrong about this. The V6 made 120 horsepower and 205 torque. Now the two that are debatable are the V8, which made 140 horsepower and 250 torque, and the Turbo 4, which made 155 horsepower but 190 torque. These are just numbers, they don't mean everything, each engine has its positives and negatives, but I do think consumers should have had the option to pick the turbo as well, especially at this price point. Moving towards the cosmetics, which is all this package is about, we have this unique pinstriping across the whole car, along with unique white painted wheels and a few emblems. What you pay for is the interior. Every option available for these birds back in the day was in these things. It had white leather seats, factory cassette stereo, beach towel and headband. Yeah, you heard me right. Power windows, mirrors and door locks, upgraded sound system. Just a more luxurious trim was all it really was. I would never want this at the time with that price tag, nor could I come close to affording one, but looking at it from the future, it really speaks for the time, which is why it deserves a spot on this list. So one of the pictures I came across, the one that is currently on the screen, to me really depicts the Fila package, okay? We have this designer, cool, expensive, aerodynamic, lavish coupe, but also, if we zoom in here, look who's in the background. A young, attractive couple wearing, who would have guessed, Fila tracksuits. If I was a teen in the 80s as a high schooler, this would definitely make me jealous. My dad and his sister in high school shared a 73 Camaro, and there wasn't a straight panel on that thing. I'm sure the kid pulling up in the Fila Thunderbird would make him jealous too. Our last entry on this list goes to the Ford Tempo all-wheel drive. While this may not seem all that interesting to some of you, having an all-wheel drive sedan offered for an Econobox from an American manufacturer during this time was not all that common. I know there was the AMC Eagle with its all-wheel drive system, and those cars were beasts. I will touch base on this later, but yeah, the sedan having all-wheel drive is neat, but Ford actually offered all-wheel drive for the coupe models as well. The first gen Tempo and Topaz came out in '84 as a replacement for the Fairmont and Zephyr. These cars used to be everywhere, now you don't see them at all. I can say I haven't seen one in a few years. But, you know, they did fit the demand for the time with over 1 million units sold for the first generation. If you would like to learn more about the Tempo and Topaz, I will link a fellow YouTuber's video in the description. The all-wheel drive system was first introduced in 1987 and would go on to live until 1991, a few years before the Tempo name was discontinued. However, the coupe models only got all-wheel drive for 1 year, right in 1987 with its introduction. Come 1 year later, and it was discontinued. All-wheel drive coupes weren't all that uncommon. There was the Subaru XT and Celica All-Track, so why did Fords get cut so early on? The all-wheel drive could only be optioned in with the LX trims, which were the highest at the time. With the LX trim, you got all the standard features you would see for a high-end economy car for the time. The all-wheel drive edition was $650 on top of this, so now we are close to $10,000 for a Ford Tempo coupe, and to me, just doesn't seem like it would be a hit. And that's what happened because some sources say less than 6,000 were ever made, but numbers are not official. The all-wheel drive in these was what they call a shift-on-the-fly system. All that means is you can shift the car with the press of a button while not only stationary but also while moving. Nowadays, if one popped up for sale, I would consider it. I don't think they're all that trash. Having an all-wheel drive American coupe at the time was rare, so props to Ford for this one. Another bizarre addition for the Tempo was the addition of a Mazda diesel, and those were only offered for 2 years. Again, these are super rare as well. And so there you have it, some weird, bizarre additions from Ford during the 80s. This video was a lot of fun to make, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Last week I did the 90s, this week I did the 80s, so that leaves the 2000s for next week. be sure to stay tuned for that video. Again, I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. And with that said, I will see you guys next week.